$2,500. That is the final number on the repair invoice, the tow truck receipt, and the 2 missed shifts combined. And every single cent of it traces back to one moment when you had $42 in your checking account and a dashboard light you couldn't afford to fix. You already know this story because you've lived some version of it. Maybe it wasn't a transmission. Maybe it was a tooth you let rot until the root canal cost 5 times more than the filling would have. Maybe it was a lease you couldn't break, so you kept paying $900 a month for a place you hated. Instead of putting down a deposit on a cheaper apartment, the details change. The math never does. You started $300 short and ended up buried under $2,500 in damage. And here is what nobody in a suit on a stage will ever say. That wasn't a failure of discipline. That was an entrance fee you paid just for being broke. Now think about every piece of money advice you've ever been fed. Cut the subscriptions, stop ordering coffee, pack your lunch. The entire self-help finance industry runs on a single lie, dressed up as tough love. The idea that poverty is a character flaw you can budget your way out of, as if canceling a $12 streaming service is going to close a gap. That widens every time your tire blows out or your landlord jacks up the rent. You've been told your whole life that rich people are rich because they're careful, and poor people are poor because they're careless. There is a concept buried in a fantasy novel, of all places, that explains the wealth gap more honestly than anything you'll find in a textbook. A wealthy man walks into a shop and drops $50. On a solid pair of leather boots, they last a decade. A poor man walks into the same shop, stares at the price tag, and walks out with the $10 pair. Those cheap boots disintegrate in a year, so next winter he spends another 10, and then he spends another 10. After 10 years, the poor man has handed over $100, double what the rich man paid, and his feet are still soaking wet every single morning. The rich man is warm, dry, and $50 ahead. This isn't a metaphor. This is the operating system running underneath your financial life. Every overdraft fee, every payday loan, interest charge, every time you bought the cheaper appliance that broke in 6 months and forced you to buy it again, you were paying a surcharge that exists for one reason only. You didn't have enough cash on hand to avoid it. The system doesn't punish laziness, it punishes low balances. And the sickest part is that every dollar drained by that surcharge makes the next surcharge more likely, which makes the next one inevitable, which makes the one after that feel like fate. You start to believe you're just bad with money. 700%, that is not the interest rate on a black market loan in some failed state. That is the effective annual rate a major American bank charges you when a forgotten $12 subscription overdrafts your checking account by $5 and they slap you with a $35 fee. $5 borrowed for a single day, $35 extracted before you even wake up the next morning. If a guy in a tracksuit did that to you on a street corner, he would be arrested for usury. When a publicly traded institution does it behind a mobile app notification, it is called standard account policy. And last year alone, those overdraft penalties generated billions in revenue, harvested almost entirely from accounts holding less than $1,000. The people with the least money generate the most fee income for the bank. The wealthy depositor with $10,000 sitting in checking gets the monthly maintenance waived, gets free paper checks, maybe even earns a sliver of interest. The person with $20 to their name funds the entire penalty machine. Interest flows upward, fees flow downward. That isn't a service, that is a wealth siphon with a debit card attached. Now pull out of the bank and walk into any grocery aisle, because the same extraction engine runs there too. A household with $50 of breathing room drives to a wholesale club, buys a bulk pack of toilet paper at roughly 50 cents a roll, and doesn't think about toilet paper again for months. But if your checking account has $4 of clearance until Friday, you walk to the nearest bodega, grab a 4-pack for $6, and you're paying $1.50 per roll, 3 times the unit cost for the identical product. Same brand, same ply count, same square footage. Multiply that penalty across diapers, detergent, cooking oil, every non-perishable sitting under your sink, and your personal inflation rate quietly runs higher than the official number printed in any government report. The Consumer Price Index assumes you have access to economies of scale. If you're broke, you don't. You're paying a surcharge on existence itself, and nobody lists it on the receipt. Stack the overdraft math on top of the grocery math, and something genuinely sinister emerges. That $35 overdraft fee isn't just $35. It is $35 that could have closed the gap between the Bodega 4-pack and the bulk pack. It is the exact margin that keeps you locked in to the higher cost purchasing loop for another pay cycle. One penalty feeds the next, and the next feeds the one after that. The system doesn't need to charge you once, it only needs to keep you close enough to zero that every small shock triggers the next fee. And here is the part that should make you furious. Researchers found that the sheer cognitive load of financial survival, the constant mental math of which bill to delay and which grocery to skip, measurably reduces functional IQ by about 13 points. That is the same cognitive hit as losing an entire night of sleep. Your brain isn't broken, it is just running a survival operating system that has no spare processor left for long-term strategy. So when someone on the outside watches a broke person take a payday loan at 400% interest and calls it stupid, they're watching someone whose mental bandwidth has already been consumed by the very trap that made the loan look like the only door. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Two people wake up on the same Monday morning in the same city. One of them will spend $1,800 this month on shelter and walk away with absolutely nothing. Not a single cent of equity, not one brick that belongs to them. The other will spend $1,200 on a mortgage, and at the end of 30 years, they'll own a structure worth 3, maybe 4 times what they paid. Same city, same Monday, same rain falling on both roofs. The only difference is that one of them had $20,000 sitting in a bank account at the right moment, and the other didn't. That gap, that single snapshot of savings, draws a line through the entire population. On one side, people who accumulate; on the other, people who bleed. And it doesn't stop at the front door. Roll that same logic into the driveway. A person with decent credit and a little cash on hand walks into a dealership and drives out in a 3-year-old Honda, $20,000, maybe a 5% loan. And that car will start every morning for the next decade, on nothing more than oil changes and new tires. Now picture someone with a wrecked credit score and $40 in checking. They need that car just as badly, maybe more, because without it they lose the job entirely. So they end up at a buy here, pay here lot, where a salesman smiles and hands them keys to a high-mileage sedan. Worth $4,000 on its best day. The sticker says $8,000, the interest rate says 24%. Run those numbers to the end of the loan. And that person pays north of $15,000 for a vehicle that will almost certainly die before the last payment clears. They'll still owe money on a car that is sitting in a junkyard, while they scramble to finance another one. 2 cars on the same road. One is an asset quietly appreciating in reliability. The other is a trapdoor with a monthly installment plan. Zoom out far enough, and you see the entire economy split into 2 clean layers. There are people who own things, houses, equities, machines that generate cash while they sleep. And there are people who rent everything. Rent the apartment, rent the money through credit card interest, rent stability itself one paycheck at a time. Every dollar the renter spends exits their life permanently. Every dollar the owner spends has a chance of coming back with a friend. The effort narrative, the one that says just work harder, just budget better, just skip the coffee. It exists specifically to keep you from noticing this structural divide. Because if you're busy blaming yourself for not grinding hard enough, you'll never look up and realize the board was tilted before you ever sat down to play. So now you know the math is rigged, you see the gears turning. The question that matters is what you actually do about it. When you sit down tonight with your phone and your bank app open, and the answer is going to sound so boring it might make you angry. Good. Here is the move. You open a separate savings account, not your main checking, a different one. Preferably at a different bank, so the money is slightly inconvenient to reach. And you set up an automatic transfer. Not $500, not $200, you start with $20 a week. That is less than $3 a day. That is the price of the gas station coffee you grab. Because you're too tired to make one at home. You automate it so it leaves your checking account before you wake up on Monday morning. And you pretend that money doesn't exist. You don't touch it when your friend invites you out. You don't touch it when the shirt goes on sale. You act as if that account belongs to a stranger who will not give it back. Why $20 and not some bigger, more impressive number? Because the goal right now isn't to get rich. The goal is to stop the bleeding. Remember the transmission that exploded because you couldn't cover the $300 fix. Every one of those disasters happened because there was zero cushion between you and the next emergency. $20 a week is $1,000 in a year, and that first thousand changes the physics of your entire financial life. A flat tire with $1,000 in the bank is a frustrating afternoon. A flat tire with zero in the bank is a payday loan at 300% interest that follows you for 6 months. Same tire, same road, completely different outcome, decided entirely by whether that cushion exists. But here is the part most advice skips over. The hardest moment isn't month 1, the hardest moment is month 3. When you have $400 sitting there and your brain starts whispering, you've been depriving yourself, you deserve something. A nice dinner, new shoes, just this once. That whisper is the old cycle reaching back for you. It is the exact psychological trigger that keeps the trap locked shut. You have to recognize it the way you'd recognize a scam email. It looks appealing, it feels personal, and opening it costs you everything you just built. So you counter it with one mechanical habit. Every time you feel the urge to raid that account, you open your phone and look at one number, your last emergency expense. The tow truck, the urgent care bill, the replacement part. You stare at that number and you ask yourself whether the dinner you want tonight is worth handing your future self back to the payday loan counter. That 5 seconds of friction between the impulse and the action is the entire difference between staying in the cycle and crawling out of it. And once that buffer hits $1,000, something strange starts happening. You can raise your insurance deductible, which quietly lowers your monthly premium. You can buy the bulk package instead of the single roll. You can fix the dripping faucet before it rots the subfloor. Each of those tiny moves is a guaranteed return on your money that no stock index can match. Paying off a credit card charging you 20% interest is a 20% return, risk-free, which is a number that would make any hedge fund manager sweat. You aren't investing yet. You're just refusing to keep paying penalties for being broke. You now have the right to walk away from every single trap that was engineered to keep you bleeding money in the dark. That isn't nothing. That is the most dangerous thing a broke person can possess. Because the entire machinery of late fees and overdraft charges and disposable garbage products depends on you never understanding the math we just laid out. So here is what your exit looks like. And I need you to picture it, because it is small and unglamorous, and that is exactly why it works. Tonight, before you close your eyes, you pull up your bank statement, not to torture yourself, to hunt. You're looking for the single biggest vampire cost on that list. The one expense that only exists because you didn't have enough cash to avoid it. Maybe it is private mortgage insurance sucking $80 a month because your down payment was too thin. Maybe it is the interest penalty on a car loan you took at 17% because your credit score was wrecked. Maybe it is the third replacement pair of cheap work boots this year, each one falling apart faster than the last. You find that one leak, you circle it, and then you cut everything else ruthlessly, temporarily, until you have the cash in hand to plug that single hole, one pair of boots at a time, one cavity filled before it becomes a root canal. Now I want to hear from you. Pull up your expenses right now and tell me in the comments, what is the single biggest cost in your life that only exists because you didn't have enough money to avoid it? Go ahead and name the vampire.